You're listening to Sweet Bites with Sandra with your host, Sandra Colton Medici. Tune in every Thursday to satisfy your entrepreneurial sweet tooth. Follow on Instagram at Sweet Bites with Sandra Podcast and Sandra Colton Medici. You can also join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Sweet Bites with Sandra. Hi, I'm Sandra, and I'd like to invite you to subscribe and listen to my new podcast, Sweet Bites with Sandra. Satisfy your entrepreneurial sweet tooth in each episode, full of digital business tips, inspiring interviews, asides from my entertainment career, and rewards to celebrate your sweet success. Find Sweet Bites with Sandra on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Welcome back to Sweet Bites with Sandra. I am joined by my friend, longtime friend, Krista Passarelli Patterson. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I am so excited to talk to you. We go back many years, back to our days at USC, and she is, and I don't want to get this wrong because you need to check out her company. It's called Positioning Collective, and she is the founder and strategic partner, and she makes it happen for sure over there. And she has worked with a lot of different companies previously at Cisco and a lot of big companies in tech. And so I just wanted to, pick her brain. She's got so much knowledge. So let's just get into it. I wanted to talk to you about, some of the things that you do. You are in leadership, and a female in leadership positions in tech is just kind of, you're rolling solo along a lot of the time. So how does it feel, or what kind of advice can you give maybe people coming up the ranks as far as getting themselves into those senior level positions if they are a woman?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel fortunate. And I think one of the things that people coming in or re-entering the workforce, because we see a lot of that too, right? Where some companies now locally, Workday is one that are doing re-internships, which is awesome. I think it's really important to find mentors, regardless of where they are, if they're in your company or outside of your company, just people to bounce ideas off of. I spend a lot of time with kind of the next generation just entering the workforce, and it gives me so much hope for the future, honestly, of marketing, of our just global footprint in marketing, what we're doing with companies. I think that's really important. I also think to be unafraid. And here's what I mean by that. We leave college and we have a plan and we think we know what we want to do. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And sometimes you got to take something completely different that may or may not get you to wherever your long-term goals are, but every bit of that experience you will put to use. And so to be unafraid to gather experience that may not look like it's on your path. I think those two things are key.
Very good advice, solid advice. And I know that you have a lot of experience with brand strategy. So what are some of the things that, like, what are all the feels that you get when you are starting out a brand new campaign for an organization? What is that?
Sure.
Is it exciting for you nowadays? Because you've been doing it for a long time.
Oh my gosh, everyone is so different. And part of what I love about being kind of our own entity at Positioning Collective, and we the core of it really is about brand positioning or market positioning and strategy, and then we outsource other pieces of the business that kind of all folds up into that. Every company is different, and so it's funny, I've worked with smaller and smaller companies throughout my career. I've gone from, Cisco's really large, and started to really work with startups, and one of my favorites was Six Guys in a Garage in San Diego. And they had developed a great new technology. And I flew down there. We sat in the garage. It was a beautiful garage, let's be clear. But it was awesome. And just fun to hear their excitement and to really start to dig in with their customers, with their board members, and figure out how we were going to do it. And so we worked really hard to position them in the market space against huge competitors. And get their message out, all of their campaign work done, all those deliverables, the bite-sized content that you want to deliver. And once it went live, it was amazing. And it is like, I think sometimes it's like growing a garden. I do. I have vegetables in the yard, and it's fun to kind of, you get in the soil, you figure out what's happening, you plant, and sometimes it grows and flourishes, and sometimes it grows a little and peters out, and you never know how it's really going to go. But during that whole kind of cultivating process, it's very, for me, super energizing. I love, developing all that and finding the sweet spot when everyone in the room, their eyes light up. That's it. It's super cool.
Um, but you were talking about cultivating, and my husband is actually aquascaping. I don't know if you've ever heard of this,
Oh, I've
but
heard of this. I don't know
yes.
anything about it, but I've heard about it.
Now, let me tell you, because I don't really know a whole bunch about it either, but I just know that he's so excited, just like you were talking about, just so excited for, that
Mhm.
little bloom, that whatever it is that has changed overnight, when he's going in to inspect the landscape and all of that. And
Mhm.
it's one of those things, and that's why I always, wonder, what keeps things fresh for marketing
Mhm.
people, whether it's in the ad space or in the, the blogging space, or, wherever it is. How do you keep it fresh? And I know that you have been in, like you said, in the startup world, but also in the bigger corporate world. What is something that when you're in corporate side that you could talk about, where, because I feel like there's a lot of policy that happens on the corporate side. And so how do you find yourself re-energizing, to really talk about the same corporation over and over and over?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, from my experience at Cisco, I will say that as technology, especially because I'm mostly in tech, I really, we can talk about this in a minute, but I've been branching out a little bit into like tech and sports and what does that look like, and some really interesting startups. Some of my pro bono work has been around that. With Cisco specifically, when I started at Cisco, nobody knew what the internet was. Like, what? And you had to try to explain it to your mom or your grandma, like, it's pipes, it's plumbing, blah, blah, blah. And I think Cisco, during the time that I was there, and or in the early days, I did a couple tours of duty. It They found a way to make it human and to make it relevant across everybody, to literally be, the internet's a household name, right? And so as technology starts to be developed and to grow as a technology, those things become more prolific. And so the more that, what we strive to do is to speak English, to make sure that we can talk in a way that is understandable to everyone
Mhm.
and not just to the most technical people. So that is like this ongoing challenge. And to try to get there is exciting. Um, I do think too that we did some work a while back with Oracle, um, not really a startup, with their with their education arm, Oracle University,
Mhm.
and they really had kind of stuck with the Oracle messaging. And we went in and got in a room with them for 3 days and had such a great time figuring out, okay, but isn't it really about the people that want to learn? Isn't it
Mhm.
really about growth mindset? Isn't it really
Mhm.
about mentoring the people that are taking your classes? And
Mhm.
really kind of turn their messaging on its head
Mhm.
so that they could stop just wanting to sell to people who, add-ons to their PO, and really
Yeah.
got into the people side of it. So there are always ways to make
Mhm.
it relevant and to make it English and human. And I think those are the, ongoing challenges that we find exciting.
Well, so when you think about your career, what is maybe one or two lessons that you've learned that along the way, that if you could have known that and just told yourself that before you got started, that you could share, like, do this, to somebody maybe just, getting started themselves, what would one or two of those things be?
One is actually super personal. I think that women, especially, if I can go there for just a minute, tend to undervalue our own um, our own value. I don't know how else to say that. Um, and I definitely did that in my career. I left as a director at Cisco, and I decided after having kids that I can't go back to a director job. And I went back as an individual contributor and worked my way back up. Now, they always got the value of my experience. I just wasn't being paid and didn't have the title. No fault of theirs. I chose to do that. And I think I think that I would say that for men or women, let's not undervalue what we bring to the table. And if that means you got to check in with a bunch of your peers to figure out what your worth is, do it. And trust them when they tell you, because we often take it in, whatever it is, and then like knock it down a few points.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And that's just not, it doesn't serve you. So I definitely, I would say that's probably one of my biggest missteps. It's not a mistake. I don't have a regret. It's just a misstep.
Mhm.
And I got to where I wanted to go eventually. And with a great company, thank God. I feel super fortunate to have grown up in the environment that is Cisco
Mhm.
under John Chambers' leadership. I think that was an amazing experience. And again, I think the whole remembering who the customer is, and I know you've talked about this in some of your other podcasts about listening and social
Mhm.
listening. I think it's probably the greatest skill for
Mhm.
all of us in marketing is to develop the listening bent or the lens for who
Mhm.
our customers and stakeholders are.
Mhm.
Those I
Most
think are
definitely.
probably top two.
Yes, top 2. Well, and I am here with you and let me just tell you, when I was with with Krista at USC, she was like leading the tech game. So we talked about this before we came on, but we were having meetings on this, external platform. This was Zoom before Zoom was cool, and I think it called WebEx or was it?
It is, and it
Yeah,
still is WebEx. It's
is it
still a
still Web?
product. Yeah,
Yes.
and they've done an amazing job actually. Cisco has done an amazing job at giving it away for free when the
Ah,
pandemic started. Yeah, they really have. It's a great platform.
yeah.
Um,
I
I,
was so in awe. I was like, this girl's coming
oh,
with the game. She's coming with the game.
I'll just
Um,
bring it on my whole toolkit. Like, come on,
exactly.
let's go.
But we were like, people were getting on. We're like, how do we get on? You know, the thing that people do on Zoom these days where they're like,
Mhm.
am I on? Can you hear me? Am I? We were doing that back in what, 2014 or 15.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, we were. That's
um,
totally true.
well, so what are some of the things as far as like solutions for people who may not know how to pivot? I know that you, in your company, this started in May, and during a pandemic, like you said earlier before we came on, like, yeah, we just start a brand new thing. So, what is something that you could say to maybe somebody in 2021? Who wants to start their own thing? Like, what is the one great piece of business advice for somebody about to start their new business?
Don't wait. I mean, and my business partner out of Seattle, Alex Crawford, who I've known for years and years, we had been talking about this for 3 years, and we could not get ourselves to pull the trigger. It was nerve wracking, and we were doing it. We had 5 or 6 clients, and we were doing the work. We didn't have a presence, and how ridiculous for two brand stewards and strategists who believe in brand. I mean, we both believe you have a brand, whether you choose to manage it or not. You have a brand. Everybody, a personal brand, a corporate brand, and everything you touch is an experience of that brand. Whether it's me at a barbecue, whether it is my accountant dealing with, accounts payable and accounts receivable folks, those are all part of your brand. So how completely ridiculous that these two brand strategists, brand stewards, don't have a corporate brand. So we brought in some folks to help us figure out what that looks like. I'm not sure that I'm sure we've lost some brand equity by waiting as long as we did. So don't wait.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's kind of what I was saying earlier about being unafraid. I think that we spend too much of our time um, analyzing what the next step should be. And sometimes you just got to jump,
Just jump. Yes. Into
just
the deep end
go.
if you have to. Just
Yes.
have a little life preserver with you.
Well, yes. And I think, it's easy to say when, sometimes you don't have that. You aren't afforded that option for
Yeah.
financial reasons or for familial reasons or
Hmm.
whatever that is. But I think if you can, you
Hmm.
should.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I am all behind that. I think that that's why this podcast is going right now is because somebody just said, start it. And I was like, but I've never
That's
done a
so good.
podcast, you
And look
know?
at you.
And
Yeah.
now we're just, we are talking to people like you. I am talking to one of my dear colleagues, and I say that because when I was in school with this woman, let me tell you, I was so in awe of just the knowledge that she came in with, and I was like, why are you here? Why are you here? Because you know what we're talking about, and you're doing what we're talking about. I think at that point, what was the woman's name? You would know. At Yahoo, we were studying
Oh,
how she was bringing people back in from
Marissa
remote.
Mayer.
Marissa
Marissa
Mayer,
Mayer.
we were talking
Mhm.
about how she had just implemented a policy to bring people
Mhm.
back in from doing remote. And I
Mhm.
wonder now, I don't think she's with Yahoo anymore, but how that,
Mm-mm.
I mean, obviously now we're all remote. So, I mean, it's just crazy how times change. But let's talk about some of the things as far as analyzing behavioral trends. I know that you have worked in, just the brand strategy side of things, but when you think about how things have changed, like exponentially in 2020,
Mhm.
where do you see 2021 going as far as consumer behavior and how people are going to respond to getting back out, like going back to whatever it is that's I call it the next. It's not
The
normal.
the
It's
new norm.
the
Yeah.
new neck,
Yeah.
whatever. So how do you go into 2020 in the brand strategy side and know what people will do when no one could have predicted 2020, so
No.
2021, what's your method? What are you going to do for clients when you think about their consumer behavior when right now it's so erratic?
It is it is that. I think there's kind of two sides of my brain on this one. Most of my clients are B2B. So they're selling to IT people. So they're selling to the people that are supporting every one of us working from home, right? So that business actually doesn't change. What they're selling or why they're selling it might change. So that's those same companies still have to produce their products. They still have to keep their people working all remote. So then what's the security angle look like? I think things like security become more and more important for those clients, for those that are B2B. Um, where we see what's been interesting, kind of as a side note, a few of my clients have taken this kind of downtime. So in March and April, oh my gosh, we have to stop everything. Actually, you don't have to stop everything, but here it's a great time for you to drive some engagement and a great time for you to build a relationship with your customers that isn't about give me a PO. And so they did that. A lot of them did that and are spending that time building that relationship. So they will see the fruits of that in 2021. They will see, kind of now I trust you. We've gotten some rapport. Now, yes, I'm going to give you an additional PO to help me with this cloud-based thing or remote some security or something like that. One of my, like I mentioned earlier, my pro bono client, which is one of our only consumer, they have a really amazing patent on a technology that can assess your physical well-being and tell you where you are prone to injury, which is super interesting, right? 4C
Yeah.
Sports, they're amazing. And they're totally in scrappy startup mode. So that's why I've been helping them. It's a high school friend of mine. So been, kind of working with them. Well, their whole premise is about having a live body in this space with cameras and assessing their movement.
Hmm.
Well, that looks kind of weird right now, right? Like, we're not, I mean, where are you going to, nobody wants to go into that kind of an environment. The great part that they had built in was that then once you figured out you're going to have an injury in your left ACL, then they would give you an app to train you out of that to make you
Oh,
stronger. It was a really cool technology,
I
and they have
feel like,
amazing patents.
yeah, they need to partner with what's that DNA company where they are gene what's that gene where they tell you um
Oh,
they
like
tell you
23andMe?
yes, where
Oh,
where
interesting.
yeah, because they
Yeah.
somehow there's a way in at least the advertising that I've seen where they tell you what your history is obviously and where your,
Mhm.
cultures and all of that. But because of that, they somehow have engineered health
Mm.
insights as to like if
Mm-hmm.
you were part of Mediterranean, well then you are more healthy in XYZ, or if you were more from this particular place
Interesting.
of the world, then you're prone to colon cancer or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it would
That
be a
would be an interesting. Yeah, we haven't talked much about it. I think they're, still trying to figure out how to do this remote and what does that
yeah,
look like because it is about motion.
yeah.
Um
They
so,
need some
they're
Olympic athletes.
well, that's it. And so they tested some amazing NCAA football athletes
Mm,
and, you know, interesting things happen with even around sports where it's to make money, not
mm,
really to protect your athletes. So there's been some behavior there. Um, but I think that business, that kind of consumer based business is also going to see some changes, right?
mhm,
We, and I see this in my community. I'm sure you see it too. The fear is going to be there far after the, you know, the politicians or the medical leaders of our nation say it's safe. And we're going to see some fear, some hesitancy to return to any sort of normal life. And I think that is, from a consumer side, going to present some interesting challenges for us as a nation, honestly. And as marketers, how do we both empathize, which empathy, it has to be such a huge part of what we do now,
mhm.
from a marketing and communications perspective, both internal to companies and external, that we have to act with empathy and support. And that just meaning that, we can't just sell hard sell. We can't do that. And that's going to
Yeah.
be fun for us to try to get around, um, because it's not our nature as marketers, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for the most part, at least in tech.
Well, and I feel like there's a different I always look at like when, because I'm a perfectionist, when do we stop the messaging? Like when do we stop curating and cultivating the
Sure.
message? So when
Hmm.
you are looking at different, business entities, whether it's, in the consumer side or in the tech side, I mean, because tech, I feel like is it's pretty straightforward. Like it does what it says it does, and it's
It
going to
can
help you,
be, yeah.
right? And it's going to do what it says
Hmm.
it's supposed to do. Now, whether
Hmm.
or not you need it and whether or not the price point is
Right.
there and whether or not it
Right.
makes you feel good,
Right.
but when do you stop cultivating the message? Because I feel like that's one of my weaknesses that I can put out there that I need to work on, is that I'm a constant, like I always am like, oh, we could tweak that. We could do that. But when do you
Hmm.
stop?
So stop is a weird thing, right? Because I'm not sure you ever really stop,
Mm-hmm.
because your audience is going to change and grow.
Mm-hmm.
Their needs are going to change and grow. The environment around them is changing. So those tweaks, I think, are important. I think I call it put a pin in it, because you want to just be able to have a pin in it to execute something. And sometimes it's a test, even. We put messaging out there. We used to test in focus groups. We test online, digital, however you want to do it. And now with social listening, you get a lot of instantaneous feedback, which is amazing. Um, and we have been in rounds of revision, you know, until the cows come home. But really, I think there, I feel like it's almost instinctual for me. So it's really hard for me to answer this question. When you listen to your customers and they tell you, your customers will tell you where you have permission to go. If you listen to them and you ask the right questions, companies as big as Cisco, me as a person, you know, I have permission as a small company, Positioning Collective, to go into communications, to go into brand, to do website development, to do copy, to do executive communications across the board, because that's our experience. Our experience is that vast as a group. PowerPoint design, all kinds of craziness. I have an amazing animator. So if you listen to your customers, they will tell you, so that you can at least kind of stop, message, execute, and then see what the next churn looks like. Either, there's a couple aspects, either new features or delivery that you need to change your messaging. What's happening in the market competitively might cause you to change your messaging, or environmentally. It may not be specific to the market, but it might be a COVID-19 kind of deal. And so I think it is always evolving,
Mm-hmm.
but you just have to decide when you're going to put a pin in it and execute.
Nice. I love that, put a pin in it, because I always am like, okay, now I'm going to take it out.
Yeah, well, exactly. Take it out and
Right?
see where you need to move it.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Exactly.
kind of that never done thing.
Yeah. Well, so what are we talked about you being in a founder position. So let's talk about leadership. And
Okay.
when you're leading teams, and you've been in positions of leadership, so big team, small team, what is your style? What's your leadership style?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I think if you were to ask folks that have worked for me before, they would tell you I'm a straight shooter. You're going to hear it straight out. Um, I have a funny one of my first staff meetings at ServiceNow. I met with the team, small team at the time, designers, writers, project managers, campaign managers. And I said to them, I might really like you, and you might really like me, but be super clear the company thinks you're replaceable. So you
Mm,
need to manage your boundaries. And I own 50% of this relationship. So
mhm,
you and I are going to work together on your career and what that looks like. I do not own that. We own it together. So, and do I expect you to work hard? Absolutely. Are we going to
mhm.
deliver? Yep. Here's our goals. Here's what we're doing. And they all were like, wide eyed, like, what? And I had half the team came to me and said, where were you 10 years ago when I needed to hear that? And half
Yeah.
the team was like, do you really think I'm replaceable? So it's I'm pretty straight out.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
I also am, because I am more of an empath. I wear my feelings on my sleeves.
Mm,
And if you're having a hard time, there was a gal that worked for me at that time actually who lost a cousin and her whole family in a plane wreck, and I couldn't hold together. We sat in my office for like 2 hours and just bawled. So I think I'm one of them.
mm,
I see my role as a leader to remove roadblocks.
mhm,
That really is my main role. Here's the vision, here's where we need to get to. Let's figure out the steps together, and let me go off and remove whatever roadblocks, whether it's procuring budget or getting executive buy in or being able to translate our needs to the executives and get the right kind of feedback. That's kind of where I'm at.
mhm. Well,
And
I know you're a straight shooter because I was
right?
with you and you're like, so I haven't received back your feedback. I'm like, I'm getting
That's
at it.
so
You know that
funny.
movie, oh God, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. And she's like, I'm right on top of that, Rose.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to keep up.
Yeah.
Um, well, so
Right. Yes.
so let's talk about tips that you might have when thinking about developing brand architecture, because I know that you do
Hmm.
this for organizations, and
Hmm.
it's kind of that like that circle, or it could be,
Yeah.
I'm going to throw it to you. So, what are kind of some three tips, or one or two that you have for developing brand architecture for an organization?
Well, one I think we touched on briefly. I
Hmm.
think listening is crucial.
Uh-huh.
So when we go into a company, we want to talk to as many people as they will tolerate, board members, customers, ex-employees, current employees, all different levels, all of that. The listening there is key. Um, then to develop the insights. Well, what did that tell us? There is a model that I use in the workshops. Once we've heard from everybody and we've done the insights, we tend to go in and say, okay, your brand needs to be aspirational, but it needs to also be authentic. And so you need to kind of, as a company, give yourself space, meaning the wider the brand, it gives you breadth to move in directions, right? If I say that I'm only going to sell pencils and that's the only thing I'm going to go out and do, and I want to message around pencils, well, what if you decide you want to sell pens next week, right? So you have to be a little bit out there. And I always joke about my own personal brand. um, I hope that people recognize me as thoughtful, as empathetic, as knowledgeable. There are days when they're going to recognize me as sarcastic and snippy. And those are not my best days. That is not my brand. My brand, I try to be that every day, what I want to be. So if you're listening, if you're developing the right kinds of insights and the messaging then gives you breadth, gives you enough space so that your brand can grow. And that's the hardest part, because when you're in especially a successful business, they kind of don't want to see, they don't know, they don't want to be challenged to look at what's coming next, what might come
Mhm.
next. So we're
Mhm.
actually asking them to open up to the unknown and
Mhm.
to position their brand in a way that may seem really nebulous, but it gives you the most space so that you don't have to constantly redo it. You're just putting a pin in it. So those
Right.
three things, I think those three things are really what we look for. And then we start to dive into messaging, architecture, and that kind of thing. But if you
Nice.
think about your audience, what their mindset is, and you've heard all of that, ingested it, figured out what the insights are, and then given yourself kind of that aspirational bent.
Lovely. Well, so I have a question, and this could be from personal experience or in a
Mm,
business experience, but do you have an experience that you hold tight that you can
mhm.
recall that happened during your career, whether it's on a project or, on the way to a project, that might have been inspiring that you were working on, or even dare I say it, terrifying? Maybe it's a mishap that happened in delivery or something that you could share with our listeners.
Oh gosh, there's probably 1,400 of those. There are a few actually, two that stand out that are actually, we were at an event. The first one, I was at an event. I was doing public relations at the time for 3Com. At the beginning of my networking career, I spent a lot of years in networking. And we were at a press conference, and the head of the department was at the podium. We were in Washington, D.C. I had lost somehow in the plane, whatever, transfers, all the briefing books.
Okay.
Mhm. So I'm up at 4 a.m. I'm at the 24-hour Kinko, right?
Because it was
Kinko's like
Kinko's back
making,
then,
yeah,
right?
because it was. That's what we were doing, right? And yeah, to get them remade and all of that. And he didn't know that that had happened, but he knew that I was flustered.
Mm.
And we had a whole conversation in the cab. He kind of got up in my grill about how old I was, and I was mortified. And I don't know, I was in my early 20s, and I just said, "How old do you think I am?" And he told me. I said, "Great, we're going with that." And that was the end of that. But I was so panicked about not having these briefing books. And then he's asking me personal questions. And it was crazy that it all went out. It went off without a hitch. But,
Nice.
I think you forget that you're really going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so that was crazy. The other piece of it, or the other one that really stands out for me, when Cisco turned the tides and made networking a household name and made it about the people,
Hmm.
made it about the human network at the time. Um, and it's probably one of the biggest efforts I have worked on in my career, to really launch that whole human network.
Hmm.
Um, and to have a CMO say, we want every bit of marketing that goes out of this department connected to this campaign, period.
Mm.
I don't care if it's a data sheet. I don't care what it is. So then I spent my life at that point drawing messaging from the campaign and helping my peers get it all into their deliverables that may or may not be related to the campaign. And that was the first time we really delivered a truly integrated campaign
Hmm.
where all of our marketing pistons were firing in the same direction. And that was pretty cool.
Nice. Well, because you were head of global brand strategy over there, right?
When I left,
When
yes.
you
But
left.
when I started in field marketing, I did field marketing. I did ops for communications. So I did all of our operations. I was a chief of staff for a while at corporate for the corporate marketing team. I did brand strategy. At one point, I ran a help desk when I first got there. For no, because the field couldn't find anything on the web, and we
Oh.
literally had a help desk for them to call and ask where stuff was.
Mm.
Hilarious. So yeah, so I had quite a few jobs at Cisco. Yeah,
Nice.
quite a few.
Well,
But I was head of global brand strategy when I left. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, some of the experience that you get in that, I mean, I was a PBX operator at a hotel,
Right.
so I get it. I totally get
Yeah.
it. Yeah. But you find a way, and you made it happen in your career to be doing so many things. And it's almost those those earlier moments that means a little bit more sometimes. I feel like when I
Mhm.
look back at some of the things I've done, I mean, I worked at a lot of retail, and
Yeah.
I thank myself for taking that leap of going and being on the other side of the counter to know
Mhm.
how it feels when
Mhm.
I have had that moment of frustration as a customer and I'm looking
Yep.
at that person and I don't know what they're thinking, but I'm just worried about myself, and then
Mhm.
flipping it and going on to the other side of the counter and going, I will never
Yeah.
be like that again. I
Well,
will
right. And
never do that again.
no, that's absolutely true. And I think, I also did retail. I was florist from the time I was 14, for 12 years or something ridiculous. You have, good bosses too, right? And ones that aren't great.
Mhm.
And I have learned, I think, there's two things throughout my career. There's two things, and I would tell the kids this too about sports teams. Whoever you're working with, whether they're a coach or a boss, you can decide you're stuck with them for some amount of time, however long you choose. So you can decide if you want to be more or less like them.
Mhm.
That's you get to carry on either their prophecy or however you want to say that or not. You can change and be different. And that's the only way to do it. The other thing that really helps me in those situations is I got to believe that everyone's trying their best. And even in your retail example, it's why I don't scream at the TV so much when sports are not going my way. Everyone really, I do believe that people try their best. Now, is it the same best that you would give? Maybe not. Is it the same best as so and so? It doesn't matter. It's their best. And so, for whatever their circumstances are, they are trying their best. And so, if we kind of all can understand that, I think it'll help,
I do think it will help, especially in 2021, because we are
right?
all doing our best.
Exactly. And no
Yeah.
judgment about that. I mean, can we
Yeah.
not have judgment about that, about what that looks like, about
Yeah.
what your best looks like versus mine or somebody else's? I think we just have to be a little bit more forgiving there.
Yeah. Well, Krista has let me know that she's going to stick around for Extra Bite on the blog. So stay with this episode of Sweet Bites to Standard podcast, and we will be right back.